Imagine for a moment that your life is a living room. How do you have your life organized? If it looks something like my house right now, there are stacks of paper and junk everywhere. That's my own fault. But there is I know where everything is. But in a spiritual sense, what does your life look like? If it's anything like mine, and just to start off, the details of this illustration are not mine. They were put together by a man named Israel Wayne. He's not a member of the church, but he is very like-minded. I believe he's Mennonite, but he has a very keen mind on God's word, and I find this illustration very, very revealing. At least it was for me, and I hope it is for you too. Maybe it's not applicable to you, but I'll leave that up to you. In your living room of life, you have boxes, and you have maybe a finances box over here. You got a box for your relationships over here. Maybe some entertainment, hobbies. Spiritual box over here. And we've got an education box over here. What do you have in your boxes? Well, finances, maybe you have your checkbook if you still use checks. Maybe you have your bank statements, credit card receipts. Oh my goodness, I've got stacks of credit card receipts. So I can go back, and if something goes wrong, I can always reach back and find it. If you're really doing well, you got a budget. Maybe you have a Dave Ramsey box or book in there. Relationship box. What do you have in there? Family. You got your spouse, your kids, work relationships. Maybe your neighbors. What do those look like? And then entertainment and hobbies. What are your hobbies? What do you do for entertainment? I still have DVDs. I actually even have VHSs still. We don't have a contraption to play with anymore, but we still have them. If you play golf, maybe you've got some golf clubs in there. I have tons of running shoes in there, hiking boots, backpacks. Like I said, I've got lots of DVDs. What do you have in your spiritual box? Maybe you got the church bulletin in there. Facebook page. You're on the church's Facebook page, and maybe you're part of some groups that you're interacting with. Maybe you have some self-help books, some Bibles, maybe. What? Journal, yep. Home Bible study group. We don't really do that here, but kind of we do. And then we have an education box. What do you got in your education box?
For ourselves or the kids?
Yes. If it was mine in times past, just kind of think of them as subjects. You got your math, you got your science, biology, social studies. What else? What else can you think of? History, music, yep, which I've long since forgotten. I don't know how you are, but and not so much anymore, although I still fall back into bad habits, is we have these nice, tidy little boxes for everything in our lives that we go to. Now imagine Jesus shows up, enters into your living room, and he says, I'm just curious. What are you doing? Show me your boxes. He walks over to your finances box. It's like, I just want to see, how are you spending your money? Or he says, how are you spending my money? Wait a minute, your money's over in this spiritual box over here. 10%, that's yours. That's for you. Your money? What do you mean your money? That's not the idea that you get from my word. That's not how this works. Don't you remember the parable of the talents? One guy got 10, the other got 5, and the other got 1. It seems like one was richer than the other. But actually, they were all broke. It wasn't theirs. The master gave it to them for a while to use, to invest the way that he intended. One did better than the other. And we see kind of this idea with more money comes more responsibility. But the master was just fine for even the one talent to be put in the bank and just draw interest. Didn't have to be fancy entrepreneurial, But it was given to them in order to use it according to the purpose for which the master gave it to them. And so this already gives us an inkling, an idea of what biblical stewardship looks like. Christ owns everything, and we get to use it for a while. Let that sink in. For us as Christians, it means something even more special. When you became a Christian in baptism, Christ bought you with a price. 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 17 through 20. But the one who joins himself to the Lord is one spirit with him. Flee immorality. Every other sin that a man commits is outside the body, but the immoral man sins against his own body. Or do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit who is in you, whom you have from God, and that you are not your own? For you have been bought with a price. Therefore, glorify God in your body. So all your time and your resources belong to Christ. You have been bought with a price. His precious blood. And so, whenever you think of, how am I going to spend my time? How am I going to use my resources? Shouldn't we be going to Christ and asking him, how do you want me to spend this? Jesus is our Lord. And we are part of his kingdom. And this kingdom has a king. And I am not him. You are not him. Christ is your king. Isn't it true that you can tell what you love by how you spend your time, how you spend your money? How are we spending our time? How are we spending our money? Does it sound familiar? Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Goodness, this is so convicting for me. And we need to be reminded of this all the time. Going back to the living room, Jesus is walking around and he goes over to your entertainment box. Picks up a DVD and he asks, "You watch this?" "Jesus, put that back. That's my favorite movie. Don't you know that I'm not pleased with this?" "Hey, Jesus, you might be more interested in my spiritual box over here. Look at everything I'm doing here. I go to church every Sunday morning. I even go to Wednesday night or Thursday night, whenever the church comes together. I pray every meal. I have my daily bread right over here, next to my Bible." Jesus says, there shouldn't be a spiritual box. You see, all of this belongs to me. And I not only own the boxes, I own this living room, I own this house, I own the property it sits on. Have you not read, the earth is the Lord's, and all it contains? 1 Corinthians 10, verse 26. There's nothing on earth that I do not own. But I've given it to you for a little while, so that you can learn to be a good steward. So you can be a part of the work that I do here on earth. I hope that is just as convicting to you as it is to me. When we stop and think and realize that every single part of our lives has been given to us for a purpose, it's going to change the way that you look at things. It's going to change your attitude. It's going to change the way that you do things. But I don't want you to have the idea that God is some control freak. Remember, He created us with free will. We have the choice. We have the choice to do things the way that God would like for us to. Because He wants us to know how much He loves us and how much He values us. And as you learn how to do things the way that God has intended, it is amazing how meaningful, how purposeful, how beautiful it is. And there are still things for us to learn. But we won't learn them unless we realize that we are stewards. Stewards of our bodies, stewards of our time, stewards of our property, stewards of our children. That one really woke me up. Your kids are not your own. And I have so much to say on this. And we're going to get into the nitty-gritty. But when you realize that God has given you the responsibility to teach them who He is, what His plans are, and what His purpose is for them, and how they can become a part of His kingdom and be a servant alongside you, it's very humbling. Anyway, think on that. And we're going to be talking about this a lot more, but I at least wanted to put that in your mind. Please meditate on this week. Think about this. What does it mean for me that everything belongs to God? How does that change the way that I think, the way that I talk, the way that I interact with my wife, with your husband, with your children, with your neighbors, with your brothers and sisters, when you're driving down the road, how you spend your money? And again, this is not a control game where God is just trying to catch you in a mistake. But He is so happy for us to learn to be like Him. Any child wants to be like his father, like her father and mother. And that's the type of relationship that we have with God. I had to start with that because that really sums up the thoughts that I want to share with you in the next couple of months. But we have not been doing a very good job. Yeah.
Sorry, can you repeat what you said, like the question, like that we need to ask ourselves?
What does it mean for me that everything belongs to God?
Okay.
Now, how does that change what I think, what I say, what I do, and how I spend my resources, my time?
Thank you, sorry.
Yeah, no. The way that my brain works these days, I say something and it's gone. But the focus of our time together, although it will touch on all of this, is going to be primarily on our children and our grandchildren. And thinking about how we have done with the gift of our children, the stewardship that God has given us on that in our children. There have been a number of studies done, and I'm not going to be able to likely get through all of this because I want to make sure that you see this, and anybody can have these. I mean, yeah, I took some information, I put them together in a spreadsheet and kind of, sliced and diced and compared and whatever. But I want you to have the chance to look at this and kind of let it sink in. And there's a lot of information here, even though it's summarized. But in the next number of slides, and again, I'm pretty sure this is going to go into next week, and that's just how my classes go. End up being a little bit too long-winded. But so there's been some, this particular study from Pew Research Center that does a lot of research, social social demographic studies, religious studies, political studies, lifestyle studies, just worldview type stuff as well, all kinds of stuff. But in 2014, and I think they did it once before that in 2007, they did what they called a religious landscape study. Even though it doesn't focus on the churches of Christ, it's still very good in the sense that it does give trends in how people are, what they believe or what they say they believe, and how that shows up in their lives as well. And they slice and dice it by age groups, by ethnicity, and all kinds of stuff. In this particular case, we're going to be looking at age groups, and in particular, we're going to zoom in. Going to leave most of the other stuff out. We're going to zoom in on our young ones to kind of see what's happening there. And so it's interesting that it's already been nearly 10 years since the last one was done. And I went on last night to see if they had done any updates. And they say specifically that a third study has not been done, but there are some updated statistics in there. And so I did slice and dice those and updated the information from that so we can even see a trend since the last time. How do you think that's going to look? I see a lot of shaking of heads. Why do you think that? Why are you thinking that? What? So by the behavior that you're seeing? Yep.
There might be some surprises. I think we tend to look at things, expecting them to be bad. I remember there's a first century letter where this father is lamenting kids nowadays. That's been there as long as humanity. So I'm interested in what it shows.
Yep.
I think there's been a bigger division in society. There's a lot of people that are tending, that are upset with the depravity and the normalization of things in the schools. So we've got a big group of people that support that and are going that direction, but I also think a lot of people have recoiled from that and are taking their kids back.
And did everybody hear that? No? So there's, Rihanna's talking about that there's been sort of a division in society, and that there's a group of, and correct me if I'm wrong, a group that is kind of going along with some of the depravity that's taking place and that's being taught in the schools. But don't, kind of getting ahead of myself. It's not just the schools. It's in the movies, it's in the books, it's in the commercials, it's everywhere.
In the churches.
And it's making its way into the churches. But that's on the one hand. But on the other hand, there's a reaction to this, and there's people that don't agree with it. And I would add to that a lot of times those people are not as vocal, and so we don't hear or see that as much. And so that might be more of a silent trend. But I think that these studies try to bring some of that out. Again, you can't ask all, where are we now, 350 million people? Was that?
I think it's 380.
It's probably 380 million now, to ask exactly what they believe and what they believed before. And so, you have to take a cross section of a couple of thousand, not a couple of thousand, more like 40,000 to kind of see and gauge where people are. Dustin?
I think just the family unit has been maybe they come under like attack a bit in terms of like having a strong family. That's something that I can see like there being less focus on that, and that causing basically more of, and like I mean even just recent events that I saw with Mountain to Rise, like division in my own family over I believe this versus I believe this. And,
Yep.
so that maybe have an effect on our youth.
Yep.
And how they see themselves in terms of family relationship, and then are they looking to their parents or are they looking to society and what society tells them is right and what they should do.
Yep. No, I think you're looking in the right direction. So before we get into causes or origin of these developments, let's take a look at what's happening. So we've got Pew Research. I've got some updated Churches of Christ data, and then I've got some focused studies on within certain youth groups, and then also how they've developed into early adulthood to kind of see what's happening there, and then also where they are asked, according to their own thoughts and feelings, why they ended up where they are today. And so we'll just see how far we get. So Pew Research talks about this category in the religious landscape that they call nuns. Not N-U-N-S, but N-O-N-E-S. And that's because they don't really identify with a religious group. They don't feel like they're affiliated with any religious group. Or they might actually, so that kind of borders on, it could be agnostic. And then I would say there's two different kinds of agnostic, it's like, yeah, I'm not sure that I can know if there's a God, and then there's those that are really sure that you can't know that there's a God. And then you got atheists that have come to the conclusion, no, there's no God, for sure there's no God. And so that altogether would be kind of the nuns. And so you can see the percentages there already. And I'm shocked. I was already shocked by the 16% in 2007. And this is all adults. And then in 2014, when I did my first series, it had already grown to 23% of adults. And that has now increased another 3%.
Could there also be some people in this that consider themselves religious, but they're not associated with a religious group?
Yes. Yep. Could these nuns also include those who believe but are not really related or affiliated with any religious group? And then I would add that actually don't want to be affiliated with any religious group for whatever reason. If anybody has a thought, please just raise your hand, say something. So this is an updated graph that kind of shows the development. It's so the top line there would be more similar to what Rick was talking about just a moment ago. So they would consider themselves to be nothing in particular. They're not affiliated with any religious group. And the different lines there is that I think they've kind of gone back and kind of scrubbed some of the data, and it looks a little bit different. And so they've kind of put some trends in there from the previous study, and then they've put the scrubbed data below it that has a few more measurement points. But what you can see, what do you see when you first look at this? So you got the top is nothing in particular, then you've got agnostics down there and atheists. Just your first impression, what do you see?
A lot of people drifting.
Yeah, and so the other part of this graph I didn't put on there, and that's those that are affiliated with a religious group. What do you think is happening? So we see a line going upward down below, right? So what's happening with the line of broad Christianity? That line is going down.
It's got to be going down if it adds up to 100.
So that's what's happening in this country. And I'll tell you that the graph in this country looks good compared to other countries. Like where I grew up, the Netherlands, it is not good. It's much worse.
Like in Africa.
In Africa. So Rihanna's saying, but in Africa, we would maybe call them developing countries, where you are seeing new life. I wouldn't even call it necessarily revival, because a lot of these people are learning for the first time.
I think it's also important to look, it's a quarter of the population, so 75%
That are
that are
religious.
religious.
Yeah. That's big. Especially compared to, and it's within, primarily in Christian faiths. You got Protestants. Protestantism is the biggest group. And you got Catholicism down below there. And then on the rise would be Islam. And anyway, so yeah, and that's kind of what I'm thinking is, that's this picture looks really good compared to Holland. I can tell you that.
It's interesting, though, that in the media, whenever they decide to touch on this subject, they always like to emphasize the reduction of people who are attending church or consider themselves Christian. And as usual, this is simply another form of propaganda and an attack on Christians. It discourages you.
Yep.
It's meant to discourage you.
Yep. It's data is data, but how you present it and how you interpret it and how you use it, how can have very different effects. But as a country, I think it's fair to describe it, at least based on these numbers, and they would call this a normalized population, sample, if you will, that they deem to be representative for the rest of the country. In general, people who believe and feel affiliated to a Christian religion is very definitely on the decline. And those who consider themselves to be, nothing in particular, atheism has kind of grown by maybe 2%, and against these are percentages. We're not even looking at absolute numbers yet, but and then agnostics, it's all growing. Yes, D'Angelo.
And did you say, where did you say the data is coming from? Is this strictly America or where?
This is the United
This
States.
is just strictly United States.
Yep. Yep. And like I said, if anybody wants any of this just to kind of study for themselves, I mean, it's available on Pew Research. It takes a little while to kind of find it all together. So, but if anybody's interested in looking at these, just let me know and I can shoot it over to you, or we could even post it, whatever. I mean, I don't enjoy looking at this stuff. It's upsetting. But just to kind of think about this, and I'm not trying to dig us down into a pit. I mean, a lot of this is, I mean, I hope you don't mind me making this comparison, but, you know, when we teach people the gospel, when the first gospel sermon was preached, Acts 2:37, actually before that, Peter says, this Christ, you know, this man whom you crucified is the Son of God. We have to understand the problem before we can understand the solution. And so a lot of what we're going to be spending on, and I was hoping to get it done in one lesson, clear, done, no looking back, but I only have 1 minute left. And so we're going to have to do the bulk of this next week. And so please come back, even though it's not fun. It is really important to see what's happening in some of the information that is coming across to us in these studies as to what our young people are giving as reasons for why they're leaving. But to put it in perspective, 40.5 million people left the religion of their childhood in roughly 12 years. That's 3.4, nearly 3.5 million people a year. That's the United States. So that's a big country, but still, that's a lot.
Well, we don't want one of our children to leave the faith.
Amen.
But I think included in that number are people like myself, that I left the religion of my childhood. I'm still a religion.
Yeah.
Clear. Right. but like I'm included. I don't know that I took this research, but a person like me would be included in this as well.
I would say that probably would fall in the above, because these have left and are not affiliated anymore, or have become atheist, or have turned agnostic.
On the previous slide that was?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it doesn't just, it's not just
Okay.
the act, but it's where they ended up. And so they ended up in that unaffiliated, the nun group. So that's the first category is, we no longer feel affiliated with Christianity. We don't really feel part of any religion in particular. And that's where we are. And so a big part of those are, how are we adding to that number? Where are they coming from? So it could be that there are some that already grow up in that environment and are still there, but there are not, that number is increasing. And so, I'm sure that there's some addition from just kind of birth, from families that are already not affiliated, but there's definitely, and you'll see later on in the zoom in these areas, that a lot of it actually consists of kids who have, grew up in a religion, and they ended up not staying in that religion or going to another religion, but they fell into this category of nuns. So, but I see what you're saying. because that's a good question to ask, but ultimately it's the categories that they end up in.
And just to clarify the number that I erroneously said a few minutes ago, I just looked it up. The population of the U.S. is 330 million.
Yep. So the 2019 is consists of the updated information that you'll see in the following slides, and so that's pretty close to what it was just 2 years or 4 years ago. Anyway, we're out of time. We'll pick this up and kind of continue to look into these numbers again, not to beat us down into the ground, but to try and understand what can we do about this, and then ultimately what are the answers that Christ gives us. So thank you.